Time once again to check in with our 35th District representatives in Olympia. It's Representative Dan Griffey and Travis Couture. How you doing, guys?
Good.
President's Day yesterday, and first, you want to just kind of reflect on that being part of the government, and you're part of the government and things like that.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at the resolution that was passed on the House floor, um, I loved it. It was a great resolution. However, the majority party wants to take George Washington, the founder, namesake of the state, off of our state flag, off our seal, off of all of our paperwork, off our websites. I mean, on and on, Jeff. And we're dealing with a $10 billion shortfall. They don't seem very serious, Jeff.
I saw, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask you about that. I saw that come through with it goes through like all sorts of these different committees, and they said one of the things wrong with it is it's just kind of it doesn't reflect the state or it's hard to draw. His picture, I think, was one of the things I heard.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
mean, it's crazy. Like he's the founding father of the United States of America. I love the United States of America with all her warts. All of the flaws and the mistakes we made in the past. This great republic has been able to overcome, adapt. We're a nation of respect and pride and growth. Enumerated rights that each and everyone has that are inalienable, and George was the first. And the founders, named the state after George Washington because of those accomplishments.
I was going to ask that if that was, I mean, it kind of has to be the reason, I suppose, that it was named Washington from Washington. And then, you brought up that amazing seal that's in right at the Capitol that is cordoned off now, but at times, people could get right up there. And I remember hearing the story where people would be walking over and they smush his nose, and so they had to cordon it off.
Yeah.
And then all the letterhead and everything associated with it. I mean, that's going to be
Every website, every driver's license. Jeff, man, this is a big deal.
that is a big deal. It is a big deal. So, all right. Well, it sounds like if it were to move forward, it's a whole process. It could take years plus a vote of the people. So, hopefully, it sounds to me too like we're kind of maybe in the middle of silly season when it comes to some of the bills that are coming
Yeah.
through. Travis, what do you say on that one?
Yeah, hey, we're facing a $10 billion plus deficit in our state budget. So maybe if they change the name and the face on the flag, then maybe we can hide our state from all of its creditors.
There we go.
I
But
never thought of the name grift. That's a good
Yeah,
I
there we
mean,
go. Washington, no, sorry, wrong number.
well, and it's ridiculous. I mean, we have like a bevy of crises in our state right now, and that's not something to be focusing on. No matter how you feel about our state's flag, it's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, our state was named Washington as a namesake after our first president, and I think it's kind of funny. George Washington could have basically became a dictator. I mean, he could have remained in office for life if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He stepped down, right? And this kind of started our process of a peaceful transfer of power, right? But it kind of goes to show in Olympia that we're maybe not so um, concerned about sharing power with people we don't agree with here.
I
So,
noticed yesterday too, some photos came through on social media. There was quite a few gatherings on the Capitol steps there protesting this and that, the other thing. And are you guys on campus while these happen? Do you go out ever, or do your aides go out for kind of a listening session to hear what is going on too? Travis, I saw you the other day with a group of folks. You were standing out there talking about the Parental Bill of Rights and things like that. So when it comes to these peaceful protests that are happening on the state capitol, and there's kids and there's old people and they got their signs, how does that how
we had
does
to
that
park
work?
We had to
Oh,
park through one. Where we park now because of all the construction here. Travis and I actually had to drive through one of the demonstrations or
did
not
they
pro.
let you out of
I
the
don't know what
way?
you call it. Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. They mostly, for the
Okay,
most part. There's some of them that don't, Jeff. There's
sure.
some of them that literally just block the whole campus and we just sit there for hours.
That's what makes this place great is, you got people showing up to talk about their issues, whether you agree with them or not. And,
Yeah.
we hear those people, and when they're done with their protest or their rally or whatever it may be, they typically come and visit us in our offices or in committees, right, in the halls. So we get to hear, what they're about, and I'm okay to hear
Yeah.
different opinions, even if it's ones that I don't personally hold. I think that's what makes this place great. You're supposed to be actively listening to people, because government is a system of inputs and outputs, and you only get the right outputs when you get the right inputs.
Do you get the sense that that continues on either depending on whoever's in the majority party or the minority party, that when those gatherings happen, when citizens come to talk on committee in front and speak passionately about an issue that they care about, whether it's safety or law enforcement or farming or whatever, that those types of those passionate pleas by their voters actually do make a difference, or for how often do you think that, well, it's all kind of a dog and pony show. We already know how we're voting, and we just have to do this time allotment because it's written into the rules.
Well, I mean, I think they do make a difference. Absolutely. We make our money on taking what we consider terrible bills and making them a little better, or through a lot of education and effort defeating the bill, right? That's the loyal minority, right? That's our prerogative. But the people's house is where those things should happen. There should be demonstrations. I got to tell you, Jeff, 5 or 6 years ago, I don't know if you remember, we talked about they were spray painting the Capitol in their protests. I'm not seeing that these days. The temperament is strong. They're forcefully trying to get their opinions out, but they're not doing it in such a negative, destructive way. That's what's supposed to happen in this great republic. I'm really proud that they do it. It does change my mind quite often.
Do you
Yeah,
get this? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Travis.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you feel like what you maybe saw yesterday was more of a protest for what's happening federally or versus statewide, or when things happen like that, are they looking to get more of an attention to the lawmakers in those chambers behind them in Olympia in the Capitol, or because I saw a lot of protest signs on social media, and it was a lot of Trump and this and Elon and that, and so I mean they're not in Olympia, so I'm just wondering, does it seem like they're more federally focused on some of those things?
I think it's important to note that, just because you might see a quasi large protest in Olympia, that it's not always reflective of every single person in our state, right? And that goes for both sides, right? It's nice, to have people show up and voice their opinions, but if it's, some people are working during the day or raising their kids, right? They have opinions as well. They vote at the ballot box, but maybe they don't always have time, or maybe they live in Spokane, so they can't drive to the Capitol to join every rally, right? So you got to be aware of that as well, and make sure that you're representing the wishes of your whole district. So like the 35th district has roughly 170,000 people as our constituents, and they're not always rallying on the steps of Olympia every day, right?
Right.
And we have 8 million people in our state, and the minority party, our party here, represents well over 3 million of them. And it's important that we represent those voices, but all the voices in Washington. And there are some people that get paid time off to come rally and protest in Olympia. Not everyone gets that privilege, right? Or geographically far away. So it's important to kind of separate apples and oranges, and understand that this isn't always reflective of everybody. But one thing I'll say about a lot of the federal stuff. Obviously, we don't deal with any federal, really any federal stuff at all. People do contact our offices asking why we're not voting a certain way on one of President Trump's cabinet confirmations. And
Yeah.
it's like we're not in Congress,
Yeah.
right? If I could count the amount of emails I get calling me congressman, that would be a lot. But at the same time, it's like we're trying to fix problems in this Washington, not the other Washington. And we have a lot of our own problems to fix. And so sometimes that stuff's like nice to know about, but honestly, me and Dan here, we get so ingrained into the state policies and what the state needs to do to fix itself that it doesn't leave us a whole lot of time to really focus on what's happening at a national level.
Sure. Uh,
But to answer your question, absolutely, there is a lot of a lot of the rallies or protests here are in opposition to federal policies. And Travis is absolutely right. It's like, I'm not in Congress, and I haven't been in Congress, but regularly people are so frustrated they'll get a hold of this office because, well, we try to be easy to get a hold of.
sure.
And we hear it's harder to get a hold of the congressional representation.
Yeah, I bet they got a lot more people they got to deal with on a per capita basis. One of the things that I've been seeing too that impacts not only the state, but it's been impacting the 35th and Shelton these last couple of weeks is the homeless encampments, the houseless folks that are in town, and there's been some cleanup groups that have been going on and cleaning up the different hillsides, specifically kind of by the marina in Shelton there on Highway 3 and things like that. Now, some of the stuff, and you can help me if I'm wrong here, but some of the stuff I see is that they're going on there to clean up the trash on the property, but then some folks are also saying they themselves are trespassing by going onto the property without getting a property owner's okay to go and clean up the trash. And, chicken and the egg, if the homeless folks are there first and they make a mess, they have obviously trespassed themselves. But then to have another group come on too as well. So have you seen that? Do you understand kind of how I'm trying to explain that? Do you know about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, society's frustrated, right? They want to do something right and real to help those that are suffering. Some, unfortunately, choose to live that lifestyle, and I think we have to pass ordinances and rules on how do we proceed. And right now, I think there's not a lot of clarity of how you proceed.
Sure.
People talking about private property rights, just because you set up a tent, that's not your private property. The tent may be your property that you probably trespassed to set up. But we got to get past all those things. That's why Travis and I are pushing the ITA bill, to commit those that are failing to thrive in society, put them in a treatment program, and help them rebuild their lives, so we can hopefully get them to look in a different direction. I don't want anybody to be homeless in any of the efforts we're going through, but there is a serious, a water contamination thought process. There's a garbage. Yeah, I can tell you how many times I fought fires in the homeless encampments in Shelton, probably
Hmm.
150, 200 times, right? I probably put out a fire. There were, feet of ashes that were the next homeless encampment was built right on top of after we put it out. It's a terrible way to live. We don't want anyone to have to live that way. So it's not an easy thing to deal with, but it's something that we should have a lot more clarity on.
Well,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
and just to kind of portray, how difficult some of these things can be. So I think you mentioned some of the encampments in the woods across Highway 3 from the Shelton Yacht Club. Well, I mean, there's railroad tracks going through there owned by the United States Navy, and so a federal entity, right? And it took us a while between the city of Shelton and myself to get the US Navy to sign attestations that it was okay for law enforcement to trespass people from their property, right? And we got that done, but then what's left over, as you said, is all the trash, and it's not just trash, right? It's like drug paraphernalia and human feces and just terrible stuff, right? And I think one of the concerns is that we have these people in our community who are, they got a heart of gold, they want to go help, they want to they got volunteerism in their heart, and they want to go clean this stuff up, and they just don't like seeing it anymore, and totally understand that. And but we live in a state that has no cap on liability, and it's a very litigious society, right? And people can be sue happy. And if somebody wanders into one of those encampments in the midst of cleanup and gets hurt, then local government could be on the hook for whatever damage is done to those individuals because, well, technically they did trespass to go do something that was good, or at least they thought it was. And when then the natural question is, well, who's going to clean it up then? Why isn't
Sure.
local government doing it? And they should be doing it, but it to do it properly is so expensive. I mean, we're talking like a hazmat crew has to come out and do this stuff. It's incredibly expensive. I know one of our colleagues, Representative Jacobson, has a bill that would, help local governments with those cleanup efforts. And but like what Dan said, like whether it's the fire department or anyone else, um, you know, it seems like until we fix the underlying problem, they're just going to build a new encampment right on top of it.
Yeah, it's a tough situation too, especially with some of those properties owned by people not necessarily living in Shelton. They may not
Yeah.
fully be aware of what's going on. I know at the sheriff luncheons that happen, one of the guys that shows up there and talks, he's been trying to find those property owners, mailing addresses and sending them, hey, I'm a concerned citizen in Shelton. Did you know this is happening on your property? And we at the radio station also have dealt with this issue. And it's a very complicated and time consuming process in, versus just saying, hey, this is our property. There's the property line, get off the property. It was a whole rigmarole to figure out how to get this going and finally have the backing of the law enforcement community to come and help us with that because too, I wasn't comfortable being, going by myself and saying, hey, this is our property here and I don't, please leave. And so it is a complicated process and
Well,
you're right. There's not a lot of, if step A, go to step B. If step B, go to step C, and let's move this along quickly.
well, and one more thing that's very concerning that's happening here, and I think it's House Bill 1380. It would basically give homeless people who are building these encampments in our communities who may not even be from here, it'll give them the right to literally sue counties and cities if they try to clean up these homeless encampments.
Yeah.
Uh, that would be a devastating policy for our community for sure. And we're fighting really hard against that. When I first saw that bill dropped before the session, I thought, oh, well, there's no way. But that thing's cooking. That thing's moving right along to the legislature. And I'm just shocked that that is a legitimate policy here in Olympia. Um, I mean, our problems will get 1,000 times worse under that bill, and it will handcuff our local governments. They won't be able to do anything about it, and it will dramatically increase the amount of encampments that we have.
Well, there's another bill running through transportation that would make it illegal to impound someone's derelict vehicle because they could then label it as a home. And if it's parked in an unsafe position, or leaking gasoline, leaking oil, whatever, the local authorities will have nothing to do with it. And then if they are impounded, the the towing company would then have to pay the entire impound fee back and deliver their vehicle back to them. We put government and society in an untenable position when you don't give them any options whatsoever. So that's why it is so hard for you to go up to your property, the transmitter site, Jeff, and try to get any satisfaction. There's really no laws or push. We had to do Oakland Bay had derelict vessels for years and years. And they were leaking into the Oakland Bay and contaminating it. We had to pass a law to help to help them remove those. And then the ecology was fining the property owner, Sierra Pacific,
Sure.
for that, and they weren't allowing it. They said, no, we don't want these derelict vessels. We need them gone. Anyway, we got them gone, but it took way longer than it should have taken.
The other issue you mentioned, transportation. I met with Sheriff Sperling last week as well, and he was concerned about a bill coming through. And I saw Thurston County Sheriff Sanders as well post on his social media over the weekend about a bill that is being considered on changing the requirements, lessening them in a sense on what type of stops are available for law enforcement from, certain, no headlights or, your blinkers out or even expired tabs and things like that in some respects. Have you guys seen that one? What are you
Oh
trying to
yeah,
do on that?
that bill went through the Transportation Committee. It's an to the Community Safety Committee. It's a bad idea. WSP tells us that 1 out of 10 of those uh, vehicle defect stops results in a DUI. And right now, DUI deaths are at an all-time high in Washington State, and they're climbing at a meteoric rate. People are dying on Washington State's roads at again a shocking level. Um, I don't think I don't think that's what the maker of the bill or the sponsor of the bill intended. But when you draft bills like this, you have to dig deep. You have to understand the total consequences. Now, law enforcement's pushback is, there's a list of about 150 non-moving violations, laws that would they would not be able to pull people over for. And I worked in domestic violence and human trafficking realm since I've been here. We tell them if you wake up in a trunk, start ripping wires. Hopefully, you will impact the tail light, and then you will gain the attention of a law enforcement officer. I mean, that's just one reason. But
Hmm.
here's the deal: law enforcement said if you want people to legally drive without a bumper or without tail lights or without brake lights or without licensing the vehicle, then just make those things legal. Don't put law enforcement into a position where they're not able to enforce the law. It's a mistake.
Yeah, and then as I read further in that too, there was some other grant opportunities, I guess, to help them get it fixed. But then on the back end too, what I saw on Sheriff Sanders's post was that too, then the amount of, he mentioned the paperwork that was involved, that you would still have to do lots of paperwork for all of these potential stops that you may or may not even.
Well, you mentioned one part of the bill I like. There's one section of that bill, which is when they pull them over, if they find that someone's low income, they could refer them to a service or a group that has volunteered to do at low or no cost those repairs. Maybe it's a light bulb, maybe it's a fuse, maybe you have a short. I think that's compassion, and that is a good thing that we could establish. Sheriff Sanders has entered into that voluntarily in Thurston County, and he said it's been very successful, and it really gives the law enforcement officers a sense of pride that they helped out. Law enforcement doesn't want to do this to be meanies, right? They want to do it to keep the public safe. And vehicles that don't have proper signaling devices, don't have headlights, don't have tail lights, and that are not paying their fair share in the licensing arena, uh, they should be pulled over. They should be talked to. And if they're under the influence of intoxicating substance, they should be prosecuted for that.
Well, we got a couple of bills now to keep our eyes on until we meet again here next week. As always, I really appreciate the time talking with you and explaining from your guys' perspective what you see in Olympia happening that impacts the 35th, but also the whole state. So we'll check back in next week and see how other bills are coming through as we're about 60 days left when we meet again here. I think I saw that the 68 days or so left in the session already. Things are flying through, and it's always good to talk with you guys. 35th District Representatives Travis Couture and Dan Griffey. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good to talk with you.
Take care.